It's day 22 of the hush money trial. The day Juan Merchan gave his instructions, and the jury began their deliberations. Here's Trump arriving at court.
Thank you very much. I would say, in listening to the charges from the judge, who's, as you know, very conflicted and corrupt, because of the confliction, very, very corrupt. Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. The whole country's a mess between the borders and fake elections, and you have a trial like this, where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe. He's got to do his job. And it's not for me, that I can tell you. It's a disgrace. And I mean that. Mother Teresa could not beat those charges, but we'll see. We'll see how we do. It's a very disgraceful situation. Every single legal scholar and expert said this is no case. It shouldn't be brought, and it certainly could have been brought 7 years ago, not in the middle of a presidential election. It was all done by Joe Biden. This judge contributed to Joe Biden, and far worse than that, but I'm not allowed to talk about it because I have a gag order. Far worse than that, by 1,000 times worse than that. The worst I've ever heard, but I can't talk about it. It'll be talked about, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. But it'll be talked about in the history books. What's happening here is weaponization at a level that nobody's seen before, ever. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. So I'll stay around here. This is 5 weeks, and 5 weeks of really essentially not campaigning, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks. Something's going on. Because I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal. It's a weaponized deal for the Democrats to hit their political opponent. For Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States. He's destroying our country. He's letting millions of people from jails, from prisons, from insane asylums, from mental institutions. Drug dealers pour in. Venezuela, if you look at their crime statistics, they've gone down 72% in crime because they're releasing all their criminals into our country because of this horrible president that we have. And then they have a protest of Robert De Niro yesterday. He's a fool. He's a broken down fool standing out there, and he got maggot. He got maggot yesterday. He got a big dose of it. But I just want to say it's a very unfair trial. It should have never happened. If it was going to happen, it should have happened 7 years ago. As you know, Bragg didn't want to bring it. The Southern District didn't bring it. The FEC didn't bring it. This judge didn't even let us use the #1 election attorney. He's making the rules. He doesn't know anything about elections. He doesn't know anything about voting and vote counts. He doesn't know anything about this stuff. That's not his profession. We had the leading election expert in the country, Brad Smith, ready to testify. Wouldn't let him do it. They wouldn't let another gentleman who represented, and you know very well, you saw it. It was the worst I think I've ever seen anyone treated on the stand. Bob Costello, wouldn't let him talk about all of the hundreds of emails that he was sent by a gentleman, another gentleman, who I can't mention because I'm gagged. Every time I speak to you, you ask me simple questions. I'm not allowed to give you the answer because I'm gagged by this judge. But we have a very, very serious problem here. I mean, our country's going bad. And remember, and let me just leave you with this. This is all because of Joe Biden and I don't even think it's him. I don't think he's smart enough to think about it. But it's the people that surround him in the office. They're smart. They're fascists, they're communists, but they're smart. And they're ruining our country. But we're going to win this election. November 5th is going to be the most important day in the history of our country. We're going to take back our country from these fascists and these thugs that are destroying us with inflation and with everything they do, how stupid they are, allowing 15, 16, 17 million people into our country, totally unvetted, totally unchecked. We're going to bring back our nation November 5th. Remember, most important day in the history of our country. In the meantime, this trial is rigged. Thank you.
What do you mean you think of yourself as more holy than Mother Teresa?
What do you mean you know it? Are you worried about conviction? Do you need to go to jail?
The day started with Justice Juan Merchan giving jurors instructions. He spent about an hour telling jurors how to interpret the law that's relevant to this case. Then they were sent off to start deliberating in this historic trial. During the morning court session, Justice Merchan delivered a variety of guidelines, advising jurors not to base their decisions on biases or the criminal convictions of other witnesses in the case. Most crucially, he spelled out in detail prosecutors' complicated felony case against Mr. Trump. They claim he falsified a reimbursement to his fixer for the hush money payment with the intent to conceal other crimes, violations of state and federal election laws and tax laws. He told the 12 New Yorkers that prosecutors do not need to prove these secondary crimes, nor do jurors need to be in agreement on which specific one Mr. Trump committed. They must have a unanimous verdict on each of the 34 counts, however. From the start, the defense has denied any wrongdoing and sought to cast doubt on testimony from the prosecution's key witness, Mr. Trump's former fixer and convicted felon Michael Cohen, in an attempt to disprove the larger case. Here are the possible outcomes. Trump is found guilty. All 12 members of the jury must agree Mr. Trump is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for prosecutors to secure a conviction. This is the worst-case scenario for Mr. Trump, who would become the first major party candidate running for U.S. president as a felon. He would almost certainly appeal this verdict. His lawyers already have argued for a mistrial on multiple occasions, each time unsuccessfully. If found guilty, he faces a maximum sentence of 4 years behind bars per count, or a smaller punishment of probation and a fine. Most experts say Trump is unlikely to face any time in prison for a nonviolent crime. Trump is acquitted. If all 12 members of the jury find prosecutors have not proven Mr. Trump's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, he would be acquitted of the felony charges, which would be a major blow to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office that brought the case. It also would be a huge victory for the former president as he bids to return to the White House. While it is still legal for a convicted felon to run for U.S. president, a guilty verdict could hurt his chances with voters. A hung jury. It only takes one of the 12 jurors to unravel the prosecutor's case. If the jurors cannot all agree unanimously on a verdict, guilty or not guilty, this will result in a hung jury. If they report to the judge that they cannot reach a decision, Justice Merchan may instruct them once or twice more to try again to reach a verdict. But if they still cannot, he would declare a mistrial. Prosecutors would then have to decide on the spot whether they want to retry the case. The jury did not reach a verdict on Wednesday. Legal experts appear to be in agreement that Friday is the most likely day that the jury will reach a verdict. Here's Trump leaving court.
Mr. Trump, how are you feeling about today?
Are you happy with yours?
Very good, thank you.
Do you have a fair jury?
I mean, what is very unfair is that I'm not campaigning in this room all day long, from morning to night, in the Biden witch hunt. Take a look at where the people come from. It's a Biden witch hunt. It's weaponization. So it seems that there are a lot of witnesses, a lot of people that they could have called that they didn't call. Now, they didn't call them, obviously, because they would have been very bad witnesses for them. But take a look at the list. Because of the gag order, I won't go down into individual names. But you have a lot of big players, very big players, that would have solved their problem or actually would have given us the win. We already have the win. If we had a fair judge, this case would have been over a long time ago. But a lot of key witnesses were not called. Look at your list. Look at the players. And you know who I'm talking about. You can take 5 or 6 of them. Why didn't they call those witnesses? They didn't call them because they would have been on our side. And it's a shame. And in particular, one witness who's now suffering gravely because of what's happened, because of the viciousness of these thugs. The vicious people, what they've done to that person. And you know who I'm talking about. And they didn't call him as a witness. They didn't call anybody as a witness. And all these people they could have called and solved the problem. The other thing, the confusion is, nobody knows what the crime is, because there's no crime. Nobody knows what the crime is. The DA didn't name the crime. They don't know what the crime is. That's what the problem is. It's a disgrace. This thing ought to be ended immediately. The judge ought to end it and save his reputation. Thank you very much.
Are you happy with the lawyers? What do you think about the jury names? Sound like a very murderer?
That's it for day 22. If you want to see the final verdict on this trial, then I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel. See you next time.